this is all at the time of the Iraq War. Okay, so basically in the Pentagon we have the Department of Defense, and that's headed by, at that time, Donald Rumsfeld and Robert Gates of Iran-Contra fame. And they have all their deputy secretaries and assistant secretaries and so forth. The main branches of the Defense Department are the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and Policy. And it's Defense for Policy that tells the other three what they're going to do. In the Army, we have the Secretary of the Army, Thomas White. Thomas White, of course, was involved with Enron. He was a senior executive at Enron. He unloaded 200,000 shares, or $12 million worth of their stock, in that scandal. I don't think anybody needs me to explain that. In the Navy, we have an interesting character. The Secretary of the Navy was Gordon England, and he went back and forth between General Dynamics and Lockheed Martin. He's president of both of those defense companies, aerospace companies, at different times. He passed the torch over from Lockheed to Lynn Cheney, Dick Cheney's wife. And he went back to General Dynamics. Then he got a job in the Department of Homeland Security. He was the deputy secretary there. And the reason he left his position as Secretary of the Navy was because of a lot of pressure about profiteering and so forth. However, his replacement as Secretary of the Navy, who was named Colin McMillan, committed suicide, allegedly. And Gordon England returned to become Secretary of the Navy and made massive profits off the Iraq War. In the Air Force, we have James Roach, and he worked with Northrop Grumman. That's right. He was the vice president, and then he became the president of this organization. And they are on this list as well. Northrop Grumman's an interesting company to keep an eye on. They have an attorney named Douglas Feith, and they have a consultant named Paul Wolfowitz. Paul Wolfowitz, of course, was the Deputy Secretary of Defense under Rumsfeld, and guess who replaced him in 2005? Gordon England. That's right, and Paul Wolfowitz went to become the head of the World Bank. And then he was forced out of that after a scandal where the media said he gave his girlfriend too high of a salary, which was true, but that is not the reason why he had to leave. And I'll explain that later. It was much worse than that. So James was the VP and president of Northrop Grumman. He got in a huge scandal and was forced to resign. It involved Richard Pearl, Trireme, and Boeing. There was a contract awarded to Boeing to supply hundreds of tanker planes to Iraq, $30 million worth. Now Trireme had invested $20 million into Boeing, Trireme of course of Richard Pearl. Then Boeing gets this fat contract, which was approved by Pete Aldrich Jr. on his last day of work in the Pentagon. And what did Aldrich Jr. do after he resigned? He got a job with Lockheed Martin. James Roach was forced to resign as well, though, after John Warner, the chairman of the Armed Service Committee, got all up in his grill about that. And then on top of that, Seymour Hersh, the award-winning journalist who broke the story about Abu Ghraib as well as the My Lai massacre in Vietnam, dug into Trireme and found how they were connected to this Boeing fiasco, and Pearl resigned from his position as the chairman of the Defense Policy Board, but he wasn't out of the Pentagon yet. He eventually resigned, and Feith resigned as well after AIPAC got physically raided by the FBI. In Defense for Policy, Richard Pearl, and I'm writing dual citizens in pink here. There's Richard Pearl, and he had the Defense Policy Board, which that should be pink too, because I can't really think of anyone on it who wasn't a dual citizen. Richard Pearl, of course, and the green lines go to financial connections. He set up Trireme Inc., it's a private equity firm. He was on the board of directors of Hollinger Inc., along with Henry Kissinger and James Thompson. Kissinger also set up Trireme with Pearl. Kissinger was the first pick to be on the 9/11 Commission, but refused. James Thompson, his partner, was on the 9/11 Commission, and I did that video yesterday, so I'll skip that for now. Pearl was caught before spying for Israel, and he's also an arms advisor to Israel. His underling is Douglas Feith. This is the Secretary for Policy, this is the Assistant Secretary for Policy, Douglas Feith. And Douglas Feith is financial connections to Fife & Zell, an Israeli law firm, and Northrop Grumman, as is Wolfowitz. Fife's an attorney and Wolfowitz is a consultant. Now, under Fife, one of Fife's employees was Larry Franklin, the man caught spying on the United States and giving top secret information to Keith Wiseman and Steve Rosen of AIPAC, the Israeli lobby. More importantly, perhaps, was the Office of Special Plans, and this was out of Douglas Fife's office. It was technically set up to answer to Rumsfeld, but it was controlled by Douglas Fife. Karen Katalski and others witnessed how Israeli generals were going in and out of Fife's office. What happened was, there had already been intelligence about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. Pearl, of course, was also on the board of trustees of the UACC, which is just the Azerbaijan Chamber of Commerce. And while he was there, he rigged it up so that he could get soldiers into Azerbaijan. Now, they had passed a law not allowing foreign troops on their soil, but he used the loophole of not calling them soldiers. He called them bodyguards. So he sent in Blackwater there to defend the pipeline, so to speak. And because of that, because of his little deal getting Blackwater that fat contract in Azerbaijan, later when Trireme was so heavily invested in Boeing and pulled up this scandal with James Roach, who forced him to resign and forced Pearl to resign from his position as the head of the Defense Policy Board, the Inspector General who was supposed to investigate that was Joseph Smith, and he didn't do anything. And guess what he's doing now? He's a lawyer for Blackwater. Do you see the massive conflict of interest there? You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.